Get out of here, cat hair. Seriously, that is so frustrating. Go away. All right there, you little demons. Jules here for WhatCulture.com, back again with another episode of the awesomely named and awfully hosted Choose Your Own Adventure, the weekly medieval-themed format where I, the Crown Jules of WhatCulture.com, take a list chosen by you. Yes, you, the person who's a bit chilly at the moment, I won't lie, so I've had to bust out a series regular from last year. You know him, you love him. It's Mike Dyson over there. Woo! Give it up for Mike Dyson. He's heating the air around me, going like this. Yes, you get to decide what list I dole out to you each and every week. And this week we have none other than I can't find my bloody kazoo. I'm so unprepared. There it is. Mark Scalise, or Scalise. I'm going to put the A on the end of that because I feel it's a bit of spice, brother. Mark Scalise for their suggestion of video games that sent you all the way back to the original game. Now, sequels are, of course, the lifeblood that helps the gaming industry keep chugging along. If a game makes bank, it's virtually guaranteed that a sequel will come along sooner rather than later. And at their best, video game sequels can not only surpass what came before, but actually remind fans why they fell in love with the series in the first place, in turn sending them right back to the original article again and starting things from scratch. So this necessarily isn't going to be a list about video games that put you in old levels. It's actually going to be things that made you think, I should probably play the original again to either understand what's going on, gain a greater appreciation for the franchise as a whole, or just because this whole thing's so bloody great, let's go back round again. So let's have a chat about them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 video game sequels that made you play the original again. And you know the drill by now, leave your suggestions for next week's episode down in the comment section below. With that, let's get on with the list, shall we? Yes. Number 8, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. Now, it will come as no surprise that there are bad games out there at the moment, but a bad game is not what you would call Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, because whatever the fresh hell this game was, well, it left a bitter aftertaste in my mouth and in my bloody ears. Even though the legendary Skater series' best days seem long behind it in 2015, that Activision allowed such an obviously curled-out dud to be deemed fit for player consumption was absolutely infuriating. And let's make no bones about it, this game was not made with love, my friend. This was made as a contractual obligation because they were like, right, well, the license is expiring soon, so let's just get one more game out there. Oh, brother, thanks. And indeed, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, or 5, remains one of the most embarrassingly incompetent sequels in the beloved franchise. It looks dated, the skating doesn't even feel good, and it launched jam-packed with glitches. In fact, it was so bad that it forced fans to go back in time to remember the glory days of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, Pro Skater 2, Pro Skater 3, Pro Skater 4, American Wasteland, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater Underground, Vogue 2, other game. Was Project 8 any good? I can't remember anymore. My brain is so addled with other things.
Job's a good un.
Anyway, thankfully, Activision also realised their mistake and actually came out pretty good in the end, because they released the Pro Skater 1 and 2 remaster remake. I can't remember what we ended up calling it in the end, but it was an absolute barnstormer, allowing us to play the original games in the best way possible. So boo on you, Activision, for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 or 5, but also cheers, you came good in the end. Thanks, brother. Number 7, Max Payne 3. So I can't imagine how the conversation went when they decided to pitch Max Payne 3 and its significant change of tone, but I imagine it went something like this. Here up, mate, you know that video game franchise that we do there make, that Max Payne franchise? You know that it's all like grim and grimy and gritty, right? What if we just add a load of sun to it? What? Yeah, go on then. But to Rockstar's enormous credit, their bold change to the formula mostly paid off, with Max Payne 3's gritty cinematic storytelling and first-rate bullet time-infused gunplay ensuring that it felt like a more than worthy entry. It's a prime example of a game that's both very different to its predecessors and yet excellent in its own unique way. All the same though, it's not exactly a game that you can just jump straight in on and get a real understanding of the Max Payne character, so a lot of people who were turned on by the over-the-top gunplay that was shown here found themselves having to go back to the first two games, and boy howdy what a tone shift they had to experience there, because the first two games, depressing. Depressing? That's what I had the H in there, eh? Depressing is what I'm trying to say. Now, whether you prefer the style of the original 2 games or the sun-splashed heroic bloodshed of number 3, it's basically all gravy, baby. And with Remedy currently working on remakes of Max Payne 1 and 2, it's fair to say that a whole new generation of players are about to fall in love with these bona fide classics all over again. Cheers. Number 6, Resident Evil 7. So we all know how the story goes here. Resident Evil 1, way! Resident Evil 2, way! Resident Evil 3, whoa! Hold on, Nemesis, you just stay back there, pal. Resident Evil 4, oh my god, the heavens have opened and God is now pissing glory into my eyes. Thank you, mate. Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, boo! Resident Evil 7, what? What I'm clearly trying to say here is that Resident Evil 4 toned down the survival horror aspect a tad in favour of a more action-centric focus, and this was all well and good, except that the 5th and 6th games in the series responded to Resident Evil 4's success by doubling down on the action at the expense of horror, enough so that Resident Evil 6 basically felt like a Michael Bayification of the franchise. But here's the problem, Resident Evil 6, and come a little closer here, don't know if you've noticed this by now, it wasn't a good game, mate. I'm sorry to tell you this. There's a lot of game in there, but that doesn't mean that it's good. 1,000 monkeys, hidden typewriters, Shakespeare, you know the quote. The thing is that what fans really wanted was something actually scary. So Resident Evil 7 came along and was just like, right, okay, let's start over, and we're going to put it in VR. Right in your face, mate. And so when Resident Evil 7 was announced as a return to the series' more horror-focused original tone, it managed to feel both classic and fresh all at once. And Resident Evil 7's successful rejuvenation of the franchise doubtless left many returning to the earlier games in the series, because their love of the IP was now reignited by this new quality entry, and in turn it pushed those iffy memories of Resident Evil 6 to the periphery. In short, Resident Evil 7 was a reminder of why Resident Evil was great overall. Number 5, Shenmue III. Oh baby, it's been a while since I got to talk about Shenmue 3. So let's dive into this absolute cackfest, shall we? Because let's face it was always highly unlikely to be a masterpiece on par with its 2 dated but wonderful predecessors, but even so, many weren't quite prepared for just how stubborn of a relic this 3rd game was. It scarcely moved the gameplay forward from the first 2 games at all, and was utterly maddening as a result. But the biggest, most cardinal sin of Shenmue 3 was the fact that it took the 18-year cliffhanger from Shenmue II. And it did nothing with it. It did absolutely nothing with it. You basically handed something to players just being like, look, we'll eat up whatever you give us. We've been waiting so long that we would even accept the it was all a dream ending scenario here. But no, they were just like, oh, but what if we garnish this question with another question? You arseholes. The main villain shows up for just the briefest of encounters at the very end of the game before then scarpering off, ensuring that our hero isn't any closer to avenging his father's death, and the ending simply sets the stage for the probably never happening Shenmue 4. So what this left fans with the franchise with was 2 great games in weird, charming, kind of maddening, frustrating ways, and then 1 terrible but gorgeous looking game to contend with. So likely they just went back to the first 2 games and just went back into that never-ending cycle, pretending that the 3rd game never actually existed at all. Number 4, Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. Now, when a 4th Crash Bandicoot game was first announced, there was considerable skepticism of developer Toys for Bob's ability to deliver a sequel on par with the original trilogy, especially given that the series had spent more than 20 years falling short of them. But Crash Bandicoot 4 not only met expectations, it bloody well exceeded them. This is a game that encapsulates all of the best and some of the worst aspects about this entire franchise. It had so many levels, it had so many colourful character moments, it had absolutely brilliant design, and it had maddening amounts of replay and bullshit deaths. God, I love it. God, I hate it. In fact, Crash 4 was enough of a success that it helped spark a renewed interest in the original games, which had handily received a gorgeous remaster way back in 2017. Absolutely hilarious moment here that I'll just share with you. Scott Tailfoot and I can't talk about the remakes, the remastered trilogy that came out, right? Because of the fact that he got so annoyed that I wanted to put it on the Game of the Year for 2017. He's like, you can't put a remake or a remaster for the Game of the Year. It wasn't released technically in that year. Technically it was, mate. Technically it was.
Number 4, Resident Evil 4 Remake.
And while playing the very first Crash game today isn't without its frustrations, it nevertheless remains a compulsively thrilling platformer, and one which Crash 4 feels like a holistic evolution of. Number 3, Flashback II. Right, okay, question for the class here. Hands up, who knew that there was actually a sequel to the legendary 1992 platformer Flashback that released a couple of weeks ago? Nobody, that's who. Nobody. Well, to be clear, Flashback 2 is actually a prequel to the original game, but given that it's literally called Flashback 2 and developer Microids curiously concealed its setting until the game was already out, it definitely counts here. Now, as surprised, not a single living soul, Flashback 2 is a resoundingly dreadful game, one of the year's worst actually, defined by its woefully clunky combat, lackluster visuals, and an utter lack of mood compared to its unforgettable predecessor. It was painfully, upsettingly clear that Flashback 2 was a cynical cash-in on one of the most recognizable titles of the early 90s. And you know what happened after this? Fans went back to the original game to just remind themselves that no, Flashback 1 really was that good, and it also meant that they could then go and tell their friends to be like, look, the reason that I was hyped about it getting a sequel was the fact that it was good back in the day, so please play this game instead. So it actually sent traffic back to the original game that Microids didn't make. Good job. Thankfully, at least Flashback 2 landed with enough of an unfussed whimper that it has no chance at all of tarnishing the original's well-earned legacy in any meaningful way. Number 2, Halflife Alex. So do I need to remind anyone how good the Half-Life games are? No, not at all, not a sausage. Well, Half-Life Alex is also pretty bloody good from what I hear, and I cannot wait to play through it myself on the old VR headset that I showed off last week. But the thing I have been told is, do not ever, under any circumstances, even mistakenly refer to it as Half-Life 3. You will get butchered alive. The VR-exclusive follow-up to Half-Life 2 Episode 2 obviously encouraged players to revisit Half-Life 2 and its episodic spin-offs to swat back up on the ongoing story before diving in. But even once Alex itself was over, it felt like a prime time to just go back to the very beginning. Even if you feel that the original Half-Life is slightly dated, there's 2020's brilliant third-party remake Black Mesa, which quite conveniently had its full release out of early access mere weeks before Alex hit stores. All the same though, everyone should at least once give Half-Life 1 a try, because it's quite mad to think that the PC gaming industry kind of reached its zenith all the way back in 1998. Seriously, there are so many staples of the first-person shooter genre that is going on here that is still emulated today, and in many cases done worse. And given that there's no guarantee at all that Valve will ever get around to an Alex sequel or gulp an actual Half-Life 3, keeping yourself entertained by returning to the originals might actually be the best you're gonna get. And number 1, Alan Wake 2. If you were to look up the definition of glow-up in the Oxford Dictionary, number 1, you'd probably not actually find it because I'm not sure if it's actually in there, but number 2, you'd probably find a picture, if it were real, of Alan Wake 2, because my lord, what a significant improvement over Alan Wake 1. I enjoyed the first game quite a bit, but this? How have they done so much? It's so good! Alan Wake 2 represents a glorious fusion of narrative and gameplay, seamlessly blurring the line between the two and in turn delivering one of the most boundary-pushing gaming experiences in years. And while Remedy stressed that players could dive straight into the sequel, it doubtless sent many back to the original, or at least the remastered version of it, which, while certainly a lesser game than its successor, has aged relatively well for a game that originated in the halcyon days of 2010. And given that Alan Wake 1 never really received the mainstream gaming push that it rightly deserved, seeing all these people go back and playing it now to appreciate where this amazing sequel has come from is a sight to behold. Good on you, Elaine. I can't think of Alan Wake 2, though, without thinking of that bloody scene from Jurassic Park where he's in the helicopter and he's just like, Alan, the Velociraptor to talk to him. Am I going crazy? That scene exists, right? And there we go, my friends. Those were 8 video game sequels that made you play the originals. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. As always, I've been Jules, and you can go follow me here on my social medias, and you can follow down my lovely editor over here on his social medias as well. And if you would like to have a little chat in the meantime, then why not consider going over to the FGS YouTube channel or Future Game Show, where I'm doing all of my gaming content going forward. It'd be great to see you over there, and you can check out my weekly deep cut list, where I only choose games that you either haven't heard of or you need to know more about, baby. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Now, we spoke today about video game sequels that made you replay the original, and you know what? Sometimes it is quite good to reappraise where we are in life and where we've come from to gain a better understanding of how to move forward. It's good to check in with yourself to make sure you're not making the same mistakes you made in the past, because if you realize that, then you can go on to live a healthier and happier life. And that is all I want for you, my friends. So treat yourself with love. Take a moment every day to check in with yourself and just look back at where you've been, where you've come from, all your successes, all of your failures as well, and make sure you learn lessons from either one, all right? Big love to you, my friend. Take care of yourself, and I will see you here on What Culture next Tuesday. Bye.